Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Resilient Fire podcast. Thank you for listening. This is one of our early podcast recordings, but we're glad to have you here and listen in as I have a conversation with Jaime Black Morsette. Jaime is a Red River Métis artist and activist with family script signed in the community of St. Andrews, Manitoba. Jaime lives and works on her home territory near the confluence of the Red and Assiniboine rivers. Founder of the REDress Project in 2009, Jaime has been using art practice as a way to gather community and create action and change around the epidemic of violence against Indigenous women and girls across Turtle Island for over a decade. Black Morsette's interdisciplinary art practice includes immersive film and video, installation art, photography, and performance art practices. Her work explores themes of memory, identity, place, and resistance. So I'm really happy to be talking to Jaime today and really just talking about how I got here. Being someone who was born and raised in the southern US, we really have not had the connection and exposure to, you have to tell me what you prefer to use. I know you had Aboriginal on your website. I have friends in New Mexico who say Native. I have other friends who say Indigenous.
I know. Yeah, Indigenous is like what's used here in Canada now. I think that's like a whole conversation too around how the
Right.
language is always changing of like, oh, what do we call people? So that's what's really interesting to like. I think there's something going on there.
Yeah. Well, I started being made aware of how bad the issue is around missing and murdered women. I kind of heard, but I was like, let me look into this. Let me read some of the statistics. And I was just appalled, but
Yeah.
not surprised because I know enough history of white supremacy in this continent. So I was like, okay, I
The
can.
same thing. It's the same story, right? There's lots of parallels anyways. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when I do my reproductive justice trainings, I have really made an effort to tell folks from jump, reproductive justice starts on this land with the enslavement of Africans and the genocide of Indigenous and Native peoples. Period. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where that
Yes.
starts.
Yes, that's actually a
Yeah.
story I like often tell, like when I'm talking about the work I do, is like people, the kind of like shorthand version, people are like, oh, well, how come this is happening? And it's like, well, this country is basically still stolen
Right.
land.
Yeah.
Um, that was stolen on the backs of communities that already lived here. And like that was a violent relationship between settler colonialism and Indigenous people from the very beginning that hasn't changed at
Absolutely.
all since that time, right?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah.
So yeah, I try to make it a point to bring that up, but unfortunately, we just in this part of the country don't have a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
I worked a couple years ago with a nonprofit out in Albuquerque, and that was the first time I had really been sort of immersed in a place where I really came in contact with Indigenous communities. And I had this thought one day that my reaction was
Mhm.
almost, and this was a moment of self-reflection. I was looking at something in a museum or people in a museum, right? This sort of fascination, but also realizing I was robbed of the experience of really being able to access and build with the culture and the people because Trail of
Yeah.
Tears and all of that.
Yeah.
And so I realized we've got all of these indigenous names in the South for everything. Like we don't even realize, I mean,
Oh,
everywhere we have
okay.
these names, but we don't know the community. And then I go to the Southwest and they have the community, but everything's in Spanish.
Yeah.
Here it's like, oh, right, it's like Chattahoochee and Okmulgee and Edison,
Yeah.
and so it's all these names, but the communities
of them are
Yeah,
displaced, right? And like
absolutely.
I don't know the like political situation or like kind of how everything happened in the States compared to here.
They
People
moved
were
out.
like moved to reservations as well in the
Yeah,
US.
Andrew Jackson in the early 1800s, the Trail of Tears, the plantations were in the South. And what they realized was that it was hard to make slaves out of indigenous people for
Okay.
various reasons. For, exposure of the white folks' health was very detrimental. And
Yeah, yeah.
and so they had a really hard time turning indigenous people into slaves. And then they, of course, imported Africans. So what they did was they just drove them out west.
Yeah,
And,
just get rid of
and
them
you're
that
right,
way.
on reservations.
Yeah.
So we just did not have that kind of access to the culture and the community and people. And it's really important for me to lift that up, to talk about this important issue. And this is as I've called them, my love offerings to folks. And then I came across you and I see that you're, as we say, an artivist, an artist and an activist.
Yeah,
This is
yeah, basically.
bizarre.
That's the job description.
I just wanted to just hear from you. What message are you trying to get out there, and what are you passionate talking about?
I have a book coming out right now and a
Oh,
new exhibition coming out and a lot of stuff is happening at once.
yeah.
So it's cool to hear it's really cool to like make these connections to different places and kind of realize like the overlapping
Yeah.
experiences we're always having, right? And I think that there's something really like I feel like there's an interconnection here that I think could really rally groups of people and connect us towards like a common goal, which I think is like so
Mhm.
so necessary, especially in the climate we're living in,
Mhm.
like what you guys are living in right now.
Right. Right.
But like, like the effects of that globally are also, reverberating everywhere. And I think that I feel like the work that I do, and it sounds like the work that you are called to do um is so connected to kind of being a voice to kind of combat or like move in a new direction away from like the systems we've been used to living in and under. Um, and so it's like I feel like right now, it's like for me and myself and my work that I've been doing this work for 15 years as well. And um, so my name's Jaime Black Morsette. I'm Red River Métis. So that means I'm Indigenous and also of European descent.
Mhm.
There's a more complex meaning around Métis that I encourage people to do some research into. It's always something that we're kind of trying to find the root of. But it's a very important culture that came to be around the Red River Valley when settlers and Indigenous people began to intermarry and created an entire culture of their own. And I'm coming to you actually from the Red River Valley. So that's in the heart of what we call Turtle Island or North America, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. So yeah, so I'm working here on my homeland, and like a lot of my ancestors walked on this land, and so it's really important. I feel like the land is a really important collaborator in the work that I do, and like really bringing up and bringing to light the things that we need to look at in order to move forward as as Indigenous people, as Métis people, but also just as a society as a whole, of like looking back on our history and really kind of grappling with that history and kind of finding ways forward from that history and learning lessons from that history to move forward in a better way.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like the land does like definitely has a lot um, to teach me as far as kind of doing this kind of work and thinking through what that looks like.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of my intro. And I'm also the artist behind the REDress Project. So the REDress Project is an installation art project meant to draw attention to violence against Indigenous women and girls. And the installation consists of putting up empty red dresses in public spaces, often in public spaces at colleges, university campuses, community organizations, places like that, just not necessarily in galleries, but a lot of the time outside of the gallery, as well as inside. So really having these empty red dresses in public spaces so that the public is really encountering that symbol of the empty red dress, which represents a life lost to violence against Indigenous women and girls.
Mhm.
And I've been doing that work for over 15 years now. I put up the first group of red dresses in 2009 or 2010. And I worked with the University of Winnipeg, and we put up over 100 red dresses around the University of Winnipeg campus. And I was working together with the Women and Gender Studies department there at that university. And so they really helped me as an artist, just really kind of get my head around what it would look like to do large scale installations like this. And ever since then, I have been putting up red dresses in collaboration with different organizations, at least probably 10 of them a year for 15 years.
Okay.
And this work has also really expanded beyond just myself. So probably about 5 or 6 years into doing this work, I kind of put out a call to the public to engage with the idea and the symbol of the red dress themselves. So businesses could put up a red dress in in the window of their business, or people in their own yard just outside of their house, or community groups can definitely bring red dresses on their marches for justice and their, community movements. So at that point, the Red Dress Project, like, I feel like the sharing of it really allowed it to grow far and wide, like bigger than I ever could have imagined.
Right.
And that's really that sort of like ripple effect of making that choice to share has allowed this work to just explode and just like grow all across the country and beyond. And this work has also been shown in the US.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Anytime soon, we might need to make that happen.
I don't know about that.
Well, yeah.
I think if I can get there, honestly, I don't even know if I can get there. Like, I feel like if they knew what I was doing, they wouldn't let me there at this point. See, yeah, it's scary.
It is very scary when you are told your reality and your truth and your history is not so, you know.
Yeah, well, I think it's just like, I think they don't, like, the administration right now in the US is not interested in people who are telling the truth. So,
Absolutely.
um, and also are punishing people for telling the truth. So, so it's definitely a scary climate to be, unearthing historical trauma, and also like just even to stand up for the rights of women is a huge deal right now. But it's also, it's our call. Like, we are called to this right now because
Mhm.
our voices are needed even more strongly than even they have been in the past. So
Yes, I tell people that this is a time of just so much change, and we have to go through a certain amount of or face a certain amount of obstacles to get to the other side.
yes,
And so I kind of feel like some of this needs to happen in a certain way. It's just how are our communities going to be impacted? But we know
yes,
we're resilient, and so a lot of us, especially Black women here, have been talking about we've been through a certain amount of stuff before, and we are just going to prioritize ourselves and our communities and our families and sort of do this go within. And we've told a lot of, especially the white women, maybe you should go do this work for a while because we're tired. We showed up in November. We did all this work. We're
terrible.
the most
Yeah.
reliable group of voters, progressive voters. So we're tired now. And so just really leaning into that self-care, because that's a part of resistance too.
I totally see
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you do for self-care?
Oh, I do all kinds of things. I'm obviously very creative, so I really love singing.
Hmm.
I write, I draw, I like sometimes I'll like record my thoughts on my phone and like listen
Hmm.
back to them and just kind of like think about like I just do my own feedback therapy with that way sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I spend time outside. That really helps me a lot. Sometimes
It's
I just
very good.
yell. I just yell.
Yeah.
I just yelled in my house because I was watching the news and it like literally broke my heart, which I try to keep like obviously like you know up to date, on what's going on kind of for the most part, but I don't usually watch news. Like I
Yeah.
will reading helps me like because it's like it's not as like visceral like emotional
Mhm.
experience to read compared to like seeing things
Oh,
happen. You know what
absolutely.
I mean? So yeah, I really have to be careful with myself because I'm like I'm a little like sensitive antenna and so like stuff like just like like knocks me over really easily.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Even though that's the kind of work that I do, I still like I'm very careful about how I engage with and how much I engage with like certain sides of it in order to kind of like keep that balance of like being able to bring in that um that okay, what can we do? Like what is the creative solution to this instead
Mhm.
of like only bringing that heaviness
Right.
um into the circles you walk into, right? So it's just like that
Yeah.
self-care is really
It's low
important.
vibrational.
Yeah, like it's just like, oh, you're right. This is horrible.
Right.
Why,
Right.
why
Yeah.
even do anything? But like, so it's important to kind of like be able to. I think I also try to like feel my emotions like as they happen
Hmm.
and try not to like stockpile them because that's like if I have the time and space or try to make time and space to
Yeah.
yeah feel it out.
Feel it
Like,
out. So just now you said as part of self-care, you have as an artist just so many different artistic and creative outlets
mhm.
to address that. When did you realize that you were really an artist and this was your path, this is what, you were meant to do? And when did you intersect that with your activism, or was it always there? Or was it the push behind your art?
Gosh. Um, yeah, I love that question. It's gonna be fun to answer. Yeah, I feel like I always have been an artist since forever. I've always really, really loved, like, I've just been drawing nonstop since I was probably 4. Um, and I went through all of university. I don't know how I passed because I just sat there drawing the whole entire time. Like every single lecture, I just was like drawing and I just like draw for like 3 hours straight and it was so fun. Um, but yeah, like I've always been really creative and artist. I always loved writing and expressing myself creatively and but I feel like this society we live in like really didn't nurture that. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of like no 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 don't do that. Like there were so many things trying to like shove me off my path and so
Hmm.
I really like spent a long time going in many different directions, like trying out lots of different things and like not really finding anything that felt like it fit. And that went on for a really, really long time, for 30 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I also have always been you know, interested and connected to like grassroots movements and like what was happening in our city and as far as like community movements go and around the environment, around human rights, around all of that stuff. So it was always kind of like just, kind of on the outskirts of like so many different scenes and circles and
Yeah.
just like
And then the
watching, like,
intersect.
really, yeah, and really
Yeah.
like watching, like, I'm kind of an introvert actually, like, which might not be obvious, but I am. And, I just did a lot of watching, like just quiet watching of like so many different, things that were going on. And, I also think that like the way that I think I think in like maybe a little bit of a different way than some people where like there's kind of like no structure or boundaries between like I think a lot of people it's like okay the education is education, it's over here, like
Mhm.
this is here and this is here and it's like these separate things that does not exist in my head, like it's just all It's
That's
all
not our reality. It's not one dimensional. You know,
it's
we have all these things that impact
all
everything else.
together, like in
Yeah.
this like wonderful, just everything all together. So I think that allows me to like just make connections that like other people may not make because they keep, kind of compartmentalize things in a different
Yeah.
way. And so I think that's what kind of sparks my creativity is being able to make connections between things that otherwise would not be sort of connected. And I think that, that way of understanding things really led me to um like looking at families using their last $30 to photocopy missing persons posters for their family members, because the police basically said, sorry, we don't do family reunions, and they like didn't even, like the racism there and the just systemic like impunity that happens with when people go missing, and sort of like seeing these things happen and then thinking about, how can we make people notice what's going on? How can we educate? How can we bring people in? How can we create solidarity around this? And also express what's going on beyond the community circle. So not just within the community, but also outside of the community to the public and other people who have like this really kind of racist, misogynist view of what's happening to Indigenous women. And yeah, I guess, of course, all this stuff sort of happens without you really like thinking about it. It's not like I
Yeah.
sat down and like wrote okay, figure out this thing. Like, it doesn't really work like that. But I think that there were a few things that really inspired me to create this work. And one of them was witnessing a performance in Bogota, Colombia.
Mhm.
And I was there for, it was like an academic conference that brought together artists, performance artists, activists, and academics from all across North and South America. And so it was like really super powerful group of people
Wow.
doing
Yeah.
like, oh, mind-blowing work. Like, um, so I got to see so many amazing things, and like just the ways in which like sort of like street theater performance practice can really kind of like embody that narrative that we're trying to educate people around,
Mm-hmm.
and convey it in this really like visceral way where people like just cannot unsee it,
Yeah.
um and tell our stories in that way and allow us that agency to tell our stories where in without asking permission from like the
Yeah.
dominant society to share our stories,
Yeah.
like art and activism allow us to share our stories without having to do that, and to share them in a more sort of like immediate um way.
Very
And
authentic.
yeah, in an authentic way, exactly. And it's like not going through the filter of like the media, the
Hmm.
police, or
Yeah.
whatever, like
Putting
all this
their
stuff.
interpretation on it, and
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly, right? Um, so one of the performances that I saw was in the main square in Bogota, and about 300 community women were part of this performance. So if you just imagine, like in the public square, it was just packed. And it was like grandmas, mothers, like little girls, like 8-year-old girls, and everyone was just shouting out the names of people who were missing from their families. They all
Mm.
lost people from their families, and just doing really simple things. And they were all in the square for about 6 hours straight.
Wow.
And like it turned from day into night. They just kept like it was just going, and they had a piano in the middle of the square, and like women were playing it, and like just there were speeches, and like it just went on. It was so powerful.
That's
Um yeah,
very
I
powerful.
actually have a video link for what I'm about to tell you, which I'll share with you.
Hmm.
Um but yeah, so like at a certain point in the performance, about 40 women in red dresses came out, and they did choreographed dance in their red dresses to like this kind of traditional drum that was being played. And at the end of their dance, they broke apart like they were looking for someone. And so they were like frantic, like kind of running in
Hmm.
their red dresses. And one of the women, this like line of red dressed women, like helped this one woman to the top of the statue right in the middle of the square. And she stood up there in her red dress and she screamed out, "Where are they?" Like, just like, fuck, like so
Right.
fierce. Like, that, and that fire and that energy, like when
Mhm.
she, like that just like tweaked something in me. And I was like, oh, like that
Like
right there.
chills.
But yeah, I get them every time I tell that story. Like, and I've been telling it for 15 years. So, but that just woke something up, like a dragon up in me, where I was like, you know what? Like, we're
Mhm.
doing something about this. Like, we're going to do it right now. And this is, and that really, was one of the sort of the defining moments where I was like, okay, like this is how what I'm good at can be helpful to what's going on, and like making that connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's one of the, yeah, that's one of like kind of defining points of like really kind of knowing what my calling, my path was, and sort of like moving towards it, and like being more um just like very single-minded about like, yes, this is what I'm gonna do
Mhm.
now. Yeah.
I'm thinking back a few moments ago when you talked about how you were sort of dissuaded from becoming an artist.
Mhm.
And do you feel that that was because, oh, artists don't make money, you need to do something you can make money? Was it, we don't want to make people uncomfortable with this truth? Oftentimes, I think in marginalized communities, sometimes when we push back out of safety and or fear for safety, people will say, maybe just do this way, or maybe tamper it down, or what have you. So I was just curious, or maybe it was both, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like I actually been reflecting on that a lot right now too, actually, just like as I kind of like hit sort of like what feels like another milestone of like breaking away from those sort of narratives, right? And
Hmm.
um yeah, I'm like, okay, what are like w- what is causing people to kind of keep pushing me off, like trying to push me off? And I think there's many different places that can come from. Like, it can come from feel like shame, it can come from self-protection, or like people protect themselves by being small, and so they expect others to also do that too, or else they
Sure.
won't be safe.
Hmm.
um there's that. There's, I think sometimes there's jealousy. There's I feel like for myself, like it's, my family, like, I guess I have privilege because of my father and my family, so I definitely grew up with a lot of privilege, but there's also like a history of both incredible creativity, but also, a lot of trauma in my family. And so I think that like I've been thinking deeply about all of this, and like how scary it is to kind of like try to crawl out of that hole.
Hmm.
And yeah, like there's just kind of like a psychological like block there, and it's really hard to get past. And I think part of it's almost like survivor guilt, where it's like,
Hmm.
oh, these people, these generations all suffered, like they all suffered, and like that's what, and like maybe, they healed like, as much as they could in that
Hmm.
circumstance. And then so it feels hard when like they are the ones that actually set the steps for you to be able to walk out. um it feels like you're leaving people behind sometimes too. So, and I just like, I feel like for myself, just as a person and as an artist, like I'm thinking a lot about that. What are the things that hold us back? And it's not always like really evil, forces.
Hmm.
It's sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to leave behind the people I care about because they couldn't get past this. They couldn't heal past this point, or express themselves. So why should I be able to, And I feel like a lot of that's like psychological stuff that I've been kind of grappling with.
But, listening to that, I feel like I could understand that a little bit as well. Number one, acknowledging, what is my privilege, because, a lot of people actually have a privilege. Maybe they don't realize they have. So really reflecting on that. But I just feel like this whole narrative just really resonates with me and the issues, thinking about these missing and murdered women. I know in our community, I mean, you've over the past few years, I'm sure have heard about all of the violence at the hands of police officers, and women definitely being a part of that. But not just that, but violence, period. Immigrant women, trans women, and just knowing that we just don't get the resources, the attention. It's shaming, blaming, all of those things. And so that's why when I first became familiar with the issue, I was like, wow, I can identify with that to some extent. Jamie, I would like to know how you became connected, or I guess when you really became aware of just how it really is and feels like it's insane. But was that just something or was it, you had a moment where you're like, wait a minute, like, yeah, something's wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it all started from like really, you know, I have connections and friends and family who have been through really unsafe kind of situations and managed to come out of it, and I'm here because of that. So so that's really kind of like at the root of it. And then yeah, and again, like I was around like the vigils for the missing women around here, and like marches that were going on around violence against women. And so I just kind of was making those connections, and it was kind of a slow a dawning that like, oh, like this isn't just my own family's and friends' experiences. This is like a like the
Crisis.
experience of an entire country, and not just an entire country, but like the experience of, and that's what I learned in going to Bogota to Colombia as well, is like this is a global this is actually a global issue, and that women have been under attack for, like in different varying kind of timelines or whatever. But it's just like this idea of like patriarchy over the matriarchy is like has been had a hold on our a lot of communities. And um yeah, so it just, I think like, yeah, I don't think there was like some giant like, oh my God moment.
Yeah.
um that was more around the art-based stuff. I would say there was that kind of moment of like that connection. But yeah, like, and then I also, at doing this work is what put me on the path to actually learning about what was going on. So like I knew what was going on here. I knew what was going on in my own, experience, friends' experiences, stuff like that. But like being put on this path allowed me to like really deepen that knowledge, and over years and years of like speaking to so many unbelievable like Indigenous women academics all across the country, like health educators, like teachers, knowledge keepers, elders, learning about, traditional knowledge, like all of that stuff. Like that's stuff I learned, that kind of deepened my understanding around like the issue of violence against women, as I went along. So I didn't by any means like know everything when I started doing this.
Right.
It just was like, there was a passion there and there was a spark there. And yeah, and I just feel like that's kind of led me to kind of understanding things more.
Right. Um, I was thinking about how recent years I have really gotten into TV. I just kind of feel like TV is maybe the best it's ever been, and then more accessible.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, yeah.
So I find myself watching a lot more Canadian TV. And
Interesting. Okay.
right, and it is interesting because one of the big differences is that our programs don't really we have a few that will feature the Indigenous Native communities,
Right.
but it was actually through watching different Canadian shows that kept bringing up the issue of the missing and murdered women. And so I'm just thinking about now, I watch stuff from around the world, it's right at my fingertips, and how
Yeah.
powerful it is now just to think of it. Something simple as just, oh, I just want to watch this TV show, and you just all of a sudden you're opened up
Yes.
even
Yeah.
more to this issue. I did want to ask you, Jamie, about how are maybe that's the wrong question. I'm trying to stay away from asking people to speak for,
A whole community.
yeah. But um I'm I'm really curious to know, because once again when I started becoming familiar with this and watching TV, one of the questions I had was, why is this happening at this level? And what contributed to this? So I know, right, we when we talk in a larger sense, we, patriarchy and racism,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of those things, but I just want to know, is there something just maybe a little bit more specific that impacts these numbers and impacts this happening?
Well, I think there's all kinds of things to say around that, but I'll just like say that that's probably not like something I'm specifically more educated around.
Okay.
I think there's like people talk a lot about jurisdictional issues as far as like reserve land and
Mm,
non-reserve land. There's things like that kind of get in the way.
right.
But again, like, yeah, I think I usually like the way I understand it and the way that I kind of explain is just kind of like those overarching policies and frameworks of, like you said, like
Yeah.
patriarchy and misogyny and all of that. And that's
So
like baked into,
insidious.
it's baked into like
Yeah.
the policies, it's baked into the law, it's baked into the policing, obviously, system, like
Hmm.
all of that stuff. And that like directly affects how these I think that's what kind of allows this sort of thing to persist
Yes.
because there, and I don't know, like I'm not a policy analyst, like I don't know like
Yeah.
all the tweaks would be to like to help that out. I don't know if you've heard, but here in Canada, we did something called the Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and
Hmm.
the National Inquiry into MMIW. And so I would encourage people to look that up because that was generally like mostly women who did that work. And I was involved in that as well, doing art-based work with families and community. And um, what that did was allow families to give testimony about what they'd gone through, and from all across the country. So it was like 3 years of like traveling to different locations, um,
Hmm.
setting up and recording like the oral like testimony of families who had lost loved ones and like what they experienced when they lost their loved one, what they experienced from as far as getting support or not getting support, all of that stuff. So all that information was compiled and looked at. And also like kind of policies were gone through, like how, racism and misogyny kind of affects policy frameworks and all of those kinds of decisions and how those are made. And anyways, yeah, like so basically the inquiry published a very huge report. It's probably like 500 it's a massive 2-inch thick
Hmm.
report, and I have yet to read through it. Which is awful to admit, but it's true.
It's heavy too, right? I mean, it's
It's a lot. Yeah, it is. And so but yeah, like there are actual like action recommendations for different
hmm
sectors. So it's like there's recommendations for the education system, how they can like help this problem, the for the policing system, for the like
systemic
all these
change.
systemic change. Yeah. And so that's like literally it's outlined, lined out. There's lists of like things that actions individuals can take in their daily lives to like, help this issue. So I think that's I would definitely kind of refer people to that resource, and I believe it's
Okay.
available online. And that just kind of covers like a lot of the stuff that like I might not be able to, right? Like it's just gonna
Mhm.
like get you deeper into like what those kind of specifics are.
Well, what's next for you, Jamie, with your art and activism? Can you
I
speak
feel
on that, or is it something that you're going to unveil?
Yeah, well, I think you caught me like right as I'm about to take off, like kind of metaphorically and
Mhm.
realistically. Because I've been working on a book actually for the last 2.5 years, and it's really compiled like a lot of the voices of the women that I've worked with over those years. And yeah, and so I think that this publication is really going to launch like a lot of new things. Like there are actually like school boards and stuff that are wanting to put it on their curriculum as like a main teaching tool. And so I think this is just going to like really ripple out
Yeah.
wide and really highlight like a lot of the voices of the people I've worked with. And then also the book has like kind of like little snippets of writing from my memories of like my sort of journey of how I got to be creating
Okay.
this book as well. So yeah, so that's launching May 4th. And
Okay.
yeah, and I've been working with the Human Rights Museum here in Winnipeg. It's the Canadian
Uh-huh.
Museum of Human Rights. And there's an installation of red dresses up there that's been there since the beginning of the museum. But I've been working, collaborating with Casey Adams, an artist
Mhm.
here in Winnipeg as well. And she and I are launching a new exhibition in the Human Rights Museum as well coming up. So
That sounds amazing.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just like everything's happening all at once. Yeah.
Right, right, right. I really enjoyed talking to you, Jamie. Is there anything else that you want to lift up or highlight?
Yeah, I think I'll just like add a little bit too is like what I've kind of learned on this journey is really kind of like flipping the script of looking at Indigenous women and myself and my family and all of us as victims, but really thinking about us as
Mhm.
actually being not just about our absence, but also our presence. And so every time I go do this work and people ask me how I do this work because it's heavy work, it's like there's that absence because of violence, but there's also always in the dresses themselves and all of us that presence, right? There's that. And so I've been connecting to what I see as like a contemporary matriarchy over the last 15 years. And like I feel so inspired by that. And I feel so excited by that. And I really think that's like this shift toward the idea of the matriarchy and the idea of care and, community connection and, taking care of ourselves and each other and the land is like really like is the way forward for all of us.
I love that. I love that. And I love everything is about balance, right? And so
Mm,
really reminding folks we do that too, hey, yeah, we've got all this over here, but at the end of the day, we know we've always resisted and we've always pushed back.
yeah.
And there are things that we can be really proud of despite all of the obstacles and oppression. So yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like groups that have dealt with oppression over the years are like really could be at the forefront of creating new ways of like organizing society and looking at ways that we can reconnect to community because that's such an
Mhm.
important piece that's been sort of like taken
Yeah.
away from the larger culture that we live in. And I think that's like has been like the strength and the power that has allowed us to continue like through all of that is that power of
Right.
community. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been great. I really appreciate you. As I said, this is my first foray into podcasting, and you're literally
Oh,
one of the first people I've talked to. So I appreciate your patience and your time.
yeah.
And I hope that we can connect in the future. And I will definitely share your website and other information with folks because
Awesome.
people will be really, really interested.
Yeah, it was super great to meet you. People I work with and there's drama, there's like there's so much hard things going on all the time, all the time, all the time.
You take care and best of luck to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Theo.
You.
Okay, see you. Bye.